Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have Mark Platts with me from the Susquehanna National Heritage Area. Thank you for joining me today.
Sure, it's great to be here. Thank you.
So, and I know that we were on the same, I don't think it was a podcast, I think it was a radio show with Randy Harris a few months ago to talk about the Stephen Smith project. So I'm glad that we were able to connect again. So tell me a little bit about your background.
Well, I'm a native of York, Pennsylvania. Went away for 18 years for grad school and work in places. Came back 20 years ago to start up what's now the Susquehanna National Heritage Area, which is a two-county nonprofit focused on heritage and outdoor tourism and preservation and conservation. I actually an urban planner by training. Went to Shippensburg for urban and rural studies a long time ago, and then the University of Florida for a master's degree in urban and regional planning. But I also minored in historic preservation there. So they had a really strong preservation program led by a gentleman who used to lead these Nantucket and Virgin Islands preservation programs back in the 70s and 80s.
That was an early preservation program.
Yeah. They I think the University of Florida, for probably because of that particular professor, they were an early leader in that.
Yeah. Okay. So what?
And I now live in Lancaster. So
okay.
When we moved back to the area, my wife said she wanted some space between my wonderful family, and
that's not too much space.
It's not too much, but they usually call if they're coming to visit.
Yeah.
And also being a two-county organization, I had strong ties in York. But I didn't have strong ties in Lancaster. So I said, well, I think I'm going to live there, and it's really been great, get to know Lancaster over these last 20 years.
Very good. So what drew you into preservation and history?
Oh, boy. I think it's a combination of early high school teachers, history classes, particularly about architecture. I had a great class on a social studies class in York Suburban High School, and the teacher did a whole segment of like a week or two on architecture. And I think that got me into buildings. I remember taking a train trip to the Woolworth building in New York just so I could see the building I was writing about for a paper or something.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, that was really cool. But the other thing I think it really connected me to preservation and historic buildings and communities was I was really into railroads when I was a teenager. Trains were my thing. My dad would take me out before I could drive to chase trains and take pictures of trains. Once I could drive, I started doing that myself. But as a teenager, my mom was a parks director in a York City park, and I would go with her to the park when she was working in the mornings or evenings. But I didn't stay on the park. I followed the railroad tracks down to the yards in York, and I would just hang out at the railroad yards and take pictures and write down engine numbers. And I was in this, it was the 70s, and the industrial landscape of York City was changing dramatically. There was still a lot of factories, a lot of freight and trains moving, but it was declining. But I just spent a lot of time in this old historic landscape. And I think that train stuff and being in that environment piqued my interest in historic buildings, particularly.
Right. Yeah.
I also have had a long time interest in just American history, so I read a lot of history and biographies and things like that. But I think it was the railroad stuff that got me into more about the preservation of buildings and the historic buildings.
Yeah, we probably 10 years ago now restored one of the buildings at Steamtown. We restored the windows, and my husband, I know, was talking to the people that were actually restoring the train cars, and it was very similar. They were having similar conversations. They were understanding each other.
Yeah, well, and I'm on the board of the Maryland Pennsylvania Railroad Preservation Society over in Muddy Creek Forks in York County, where they have the historic Muddy Creek Village, the general store, and the old mill buildings, and home of the store owner. And they run excursion trains on these motor cars, and they're restoring, historic railroad equipment.
Right.
And it's it is the same, and that's an interesting place because it's both the railroad and the equipment,
right,
and the general store and the mill, and it's really focused on interpreting life in that village in 1915, which was kind of like the high point of the railroad.
Yeah.
And so, when you're folks that are into buildings, railroad cars, or historic yachts, as boats, as we talk about, that we now have here, it's almost the same kind of stuff.
I think I agree. And the process, the process to get things done is very similar too. So tell me about the Susquehanna National Heritage Area.
Well, so we're a 2-county nonprofit organization. We started out as a state designated Pennsylvania Heritage Area. Pennsylvania has been a leader in creating these multi-county heritage areas since the 1980s. I think Pennsylvania it might be Pennsylvania and Maryland have the most state designated heritage areas of any state in the country. And it's a program that was really created to try to use history, historic preservation, conservation, and recreation as an economic development tool for communities across the state. And a lot of it started in very distressed communities that were experiencing decline of industry.
Right.
So actually, the first Pennsylvania Heritage Area was actually in Scranton. It was the Lackawanna Valley National Heritage Area, which is now also a National Heritage Area. And then there's 12 heritage areas across Pennsylvania now. And to be a Pennsylvania heritage area, it has to be at least 2 counties. They want to encourage partnerships and cooperation across normal boundaries. Mm-hmm. And you have to go through a whole process to get designated, which local members of the community in York and Lancaster did that in the late 90s, early 2000s, to do the studies and reports necessary for the governor at the time, Tom Ridge, to designate York and Lancaster counties as a Pennsylvania heritage area. And I came aboard soon after that in 2003 to be the first staff member, and then we grew the organization from there. Mm-hmm. But there's also a national designation, and that actually takes an act of Congress. And we were successful in getting that done in 2019. And it was really a 13-year effort. It's national heritage areas are created by Congress individually, but the program is managed through the National Park Service. And over the last 40 years, there's been 55 national heritage areas designated. We were the last one so far, the 55th. And it brings a whole new level of cooperation with National Park Service. It brings some funding from the National Park Service. You get to be part of the National Park Network and be promoted through the National Park Service. So we have both the state and the national designations. Both of them have similar goals. Tell the state and nationally important stories of the region. Try to help do that through the places where those stories actually happened. Be an advocate for preservation and conservation, and bring economic development to communities through tourism. Really focused on heritage and outdoor tourism. So we have a 2-county board of directors, half from York, half from Lancaster. Our staff has grown from just me 19 and a half years ago to I guess we have 9 full-time staff and 3 part-time staff. We run the Zimmerman Center for Heritage, which is also our headquarters at Long Level below Wrightsville on the York County side, where we also do boat tours from here. This property was gifted to us 15 years ago by John and Catherine Zimmerman, and it's a 1750s stone home on the river. We have the river in front of us and 180-acre county park, Native Lands County Park, right behind us. So kind of a neat, you can come here and have both of those experiences on the water or in the park. We also run Columbia Crossing River Trail Center for the Borough of Columbia, which is not an historic building, but it's on a very historic site. And the borough built that 7 years ago. We've been running it 5.5 years now. And our staff there provides visitor services, maps and guides, programs. We do exhibits. It's the most busiest trailhead for the Northwest Lancaster County River Trail that runs from Columbia all the way up to Falmouth. So it's a busy place, really pop in there in the summer, particularly. So we have these two anchors of visitor facilities where we can share stories and do programs for school kids and the public and tourists and everybody.
Yeah, that's great. I did not realize that you had such a big park behind you there in Wrightsville.
Yeah. Well, and we played a big role 15 years ago in helping preserve that land. It was going to be 400 homes. It was saved. The county turned it into Native Lands County Park. It includes the site of the last settlement of the Susquehanna Indian communities that lived along the Susquehanna in 1675. And so that documented archaeological site is in the park. And we provide a map and guide for going through. There's a series of grass trails that go through these wonderful meadows up above the river. And you can go back there and you feel like you're totally removed from everything.
Right. I can believe. Yeah.
But you can come here to Zimmerman Center Park and hike up in there and have that experience. Then go down and get on the water.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So, so tell me, I've been watching the advocacy and the media reports about the Mifflin House. So tell me about the Mifflin House.
Yeah, the Mifflin House and Farm is just on the outskirts, on the edge of Wrightsville Borough in York County, just over the Route 30 bridge. A lot of folks in York and Lancaster go by it every day and have no idea it's there. Because when you either come off the Route 30 bridge and start heading up the hill to the Wrightsville exit, or you start heading down the hill to the river if you're going to Lancaster, the property is right there on the right. I mean, it's right next to Route 30.
Okay.
But it's a historic farmhouse and farmstead. The house was built about 1800, the barn complex about 1850. But its most significant roles in sort of national history were in the early 1800s up till the Civil War. So the Mifflin family that built the house in 1800 after previous owners had lived in a different property there. They were Quakers. Susanna Wright Mifflin was part of the Wright family that settled what is now Columbia. And Jonathan Mifflin was from Philadelphia Quaker family. They married. Their families were all part of the Underground Railroad network to assist people escaping enslaved conditions in the South, coming through York County to get across the Susquehanna into Lancaster and either stay there or move on to Philadelphia or even Canada. So the Mifflins early on, after building the house, started participating in harboring folks that were escaping slavery, and did that for 40 years. And there's pretty good documentation of that. A lot of folks, including Randy Harris and others, have done a lot of research on this. And they also worked with Black and white residents in Columbia to get folks across the river,
Right.
Because there was a bridge after 1815. There was a bridge across the river, and then after that was destroyed, there was another one built in 1836, I think. But a lot of times the people looking for those escaping slavery came up and hung out at the bridge watching for people when it was dangerous to cross the bridge. So people from Columbia would assist in rowing people across the river, which is, I paddled across there in a kayak. It's pretty intimidating. I can't imagine doing it in a rowboat probably at night.
You'd have to. My grandparents had rowboats on just a little lake behind their house, and I can't imagine in the heavy current trying to row.
So the Mifflins had played this key role in the Underground Railroad until they sold the property in the 1840s. and then soon after, in the Civil War, when the Confederates invaded Pennsylvania just before Gettysburg and advanced to the Susquehanna River, local militia and volunteers and some retreating wounded soldiers and things coalesced around Columbia and Wrightsville to defend the river crossing. The bridge, the longest covered bridge in the world, ran from Wrightsville to Columbia. And the Confederates invaded, came down to Wrightsville June 28th, 1863. The intention was to capture the bridge, cross into Lancaster, and either move on to Philly or Harrisburg. The Union defenders were outnumbered, but they put up a skirmish line, a battle line just west of Wrightsville, part of which was on the Mifflin farm, which was much bigger at the time. And there was a battle for about an hour and a half on the Mifflin farm property and other properties adjacent to it. The Confederates had cannons set up on the front lawn of the house, lobbing shells into Wrightsville.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, it must have been a kind of crazy, sort of, I always describe the bridge burning and that whole invasion and what was happening as sort of like the 9/11 of those, the way we felt at 9/11 with the attacks that day. Must have been the panic and feelings of desperation that were going on in the river towns as 3,000 Confederates were invading the county. But so some of the battle took place right on this property. The Union had to retreat. They tried to blow up a span of the bridge. That didn't work, so they set the whole thing on fire and burned the entire bridge to stop the Confederates. So that was a big turning point, and probably Gettysburg would just be a little town along the Lincoln Highway if that hadn't happened, because everything would have changed.
Right.
If the bridge
They
had
would have gone. They would have gone.
There would have been a battle, but it would probably not at Gettysburg.
Right.
So, so it's the Mifflin property has this really sort of two pivotal moments in 19th century history. It played a big role, and so that's really the core of its significance. I mean, it continued to be a farm till this year, but about 7 years ago, the family that owned the farm had been decided to develop some of their property in partnership with the York developer for industrial development.
Mm-hmm.
And that had started back in 20 years ago. Most of it was west of the farm, but the plan was to build warehouses around the farmstead and preserve the 10 acres in the farmstead.
Yeah.
But with the shifting warehouse market in the last decade, those plans changed, and the developer wanted to tear down the entire farmstead and build a much larger warehouse, too much larger warehouse.
Right.
And that started a grassroots effort. Local people in Pelham Township and Wrightsville really raised the alarm that, hey, we could lose this very historic property. We supported the effort to preserve it, but we didn't. It was really a grassroots effort that started it, and then Preservation Pennsylvania stepped in, Mindy Crawford and her team, with some legal help, and started helping to challenge that demolition. And they were successful all the way through the courts. But under Pennsylvania's planning laws, it's pretty easy to change restrictions on a piece of property, which this had some restrictions about saving the property, the farmstead. And so the developer basically submitted a new subdivision plan that would have removed the restrictions and probably would have gone through.
Right.
But by that point, Preservation Pennsylvania reached out to us. We reached out to the Conservation Fund, a national group that helps preserve lands and properties around the country. And the three of us created a partnership to go to the developer with a different proposal to say, look, how about if we buy it?
Right.
How about if we give us some time and we'll see if we can put together a coalition of funders and a proper use for this property. And they said yes. And the township and the developer agreed to a 2-year moratorium in 2019. That basically gave us breathing space to try to start seeking funding.
Yeah, have a plan. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, we got commitments from private foundations in New York for almost $1 million. We got the governor's office committed redevelopment capital assistance program funding to the project. Pennsylvania DCNR, the conservation agency for the state, awarded a grant for acquisition to the conservation fund. York County Open Space Land Preservation Program awarded grants to us. And we've got commitments from York County to help fill the last piece of funding, and there's still even some other funding out there. So when all this came together last year, the Conservation Fund felt confident enough that they could enter into a purchase agreement with the farm family, with the developer too. And that was completed. The purchase was completed at the end of April of this year, based on the commitments we have. So the Conservation Fund has a national revolving fund where they basically fronted most of the money to buy it, minus state grant that they're going to get. And they're holding it for up to a year or two. We're have a management agreement, so we're actually responsible for taking care of it right now. Yeah. And within a year, we'll get the rest of the funding secured, finalized, and then we'll buy it from them. Okay. And the reason we got involved in normally, we try to help facilitate things. We don't, except for the Zimmerman Center, right? We don't own a lot of property and things. But during this process, one of our board members said, this is really a significant property, and we had just become a National Heritage Area in 2019. It's like, we could be the lead on this property. We could preserve the house as a place to interpret the Underground Railroad story. Mm-hmm. We could preserve the landscape as a place to tell that story and the Civil War story. And the barn complex, which most of it dates from 1850, but there's some more modern additions from the 1940s. It lended itself to be a sort of adaptively used, more creatively used, to be a national park style visitor center for the entire National Heritage Area, all York and Lancaster counties.
Oh, that's great.
Right off Route 30. It'll be
yeah.
visible. You can easily get to Lancaster and York attractions. You can get to the river quickly, and that's where we're going. So the vision is we buy the property next year from the Conservation Fund, and then we start the process of redeveloping the buildings and the landscape. It's going to take 5 to 8, maybe 10 years. This is one of those decade projects. Gonna have to be a capital campaign and more grants and things. But we've got a community task force organized with representatives from York and Lancaster counties, from various constituencies that can help us. And we had our first meeting in May. We're going to be meeting more into the fall. And I'm really optimistic. This project has attracted nothing but positive support. I mean, the local community, Wrightsville loves it. Helen Township loves it. The county commissioners have gotten behind it. The state officials. So
yeah, that's great.
We think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
So sorry for the long explanation, but it's
No,
been a long process.
I appreciate that. I have a question. This is probably more for my own understanding. When you said that it was easy to change the protections, were those protections within the ordinance?
No, actually, the property was not protected by any township ordinance. It was zoned industrial commercial, but when the original subdivision for the industrial park was approved back 20 years ago, or late 90s, I don't know why it ended up in the plan, whether it was requested by the township or the landowners, but there was a restriction on the 10 acres where the farmstead is. There was a separate lot created for the farmstead, and it said farm buildings. I think it said farm buildings to remain.
Okay, that was the protection.
Farm buildings to remain, and the courts, the township first, and then Preservation Pennsylvania took it up to Commonwealth Court.
Right.
The courts determined that is a subdivision restriction. It was approved that way, and they have to remain. You cannot tear them down under this current subdivision.
Right.
But the simple way to get around that is to submit a new subdivision plan.
Oh.
That removes the restriction, changes the lot layout. And then just
get that approved. Yeah.
And just get that approved. And there's not much, if anything, in state law or the township ordinances that would give the township the ability to require that.
Right.
To keep that restriction. It was obviously somebody agreed to it back then. And I think it was the family, the Blessing families. They had a family member who wanted to keep living there. And so they might have done it, but it was on there. If you new subdivision plan removes it, then you're not under any requirements.
That's interesting. Thank you for that explanation. It's in the politics of preservation are interesting.
Well, some communities have pretty strong preservation ordinance and stuff, but there's not been a lot of as a National Heritage Area, we're going through a National Heritage Area Management Plan right now. That's required by the congressional legislation that designated us, and we've been working with, reaching out to people and getting input, and we have a draft plan now for public review right now. But one thing that plan identified was, we have a huge amount of National Register eligible properties in New York and Lancaster counties, but we have a number in the National Register. We have some national landmarks, but based on the resources we actually have, we don't have that many actually officially listed. And even if you're listed, it doesn't guarantee their preservation.
Yeah, there's no protection associated with that. Yeah.
And we have some preservation districts and stuff, but a lot of that effort has waned over the last 20, 30 years. A lot of it happened in the 70s and 80s, a lot of historic districts designations, when there was a lot of grassroots momentum for preservation. But I don't know there's been many historic districts created. So we're going to try to help maybe spur some more interest in that kind of thing too, as part of our national heritage area.
I think that's a good thing. I'm part-time executive director of the Preservation Trust in Lancaster County, and we're working with one of the municipalities to get a Main Street designation. And one of the requirements for that is to be a National Register district. But I can't get any of the consultants to call me back to write one. I'm like, I said, I probably could do it, but it's going to take a lot of time. I would rather have somebody else do it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work to do all that.
I agree. I think that there's a lot. There are people who do it, but I think they're pretty busy too with, because I think they take projects all over. Yeah.
Well, organizations like Preservation Trust. When was Preservation Trust founded?
In the late 60s. Yeah, the late 60s.
Late 60s. Historic York in York, I think, was the early 70s.
Right.
There was this real sort of effort back then and focus on preservation. That's when the National Historic Preservation Act was passed, and a lot of focus, and there was funding back then more. And a lot of groups, were created then. A lot of municipalities did a lot of work, and I think that's when my interest started.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
As a kid, but it's not as aggressive as it used to be.
No, it's not. So I guess that kind of leads me into my next question. Do you see any trends or challenges in preservation?
Oh boy. Yeah, that one, trying to find ways to spark renewed interest in sort of communities embracing preservation as a tool, and the value of it it seems more challenging than it used to be. But at the same time, I think there's been a lot more creative use of historic buildings in the last 20, 30 years than there maybe was before that. I think, the initial preservation effort focused on preserving buildings and their historical integrity, preferably for their historical use, or preserving them as relics and museums and things like that. Whereas what I get excited about is adaptive use of historic buildings, and I think in Europe, they're far ahead of us on this.
Right.
I've only been to England, but I read and see things going on in Europe, and they don't have a problem with juxtaposing modern additions right into historic structures and integrating them together. It creates a really exciting environment and preserves the historic resource. I think we're getting better at it.
I agree.
And particularly in like Lancaster and New York, there's been some really great projects in the old warehouses and the tobacco warehouses and the factory buildings, some of the commercial buildings that are doing that. It's just, and historic tax credits, I'm sure, help and spur a lot of that on, which means we need to keep supporting them, having state and national tax credits, so it can make it level the playing field for developers to take on a historic building. But we're also a fairly conservative place that's kind of like, well, people can do what they want,
Right. Yeah. The whole
property
sort of
attitude
issue. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, hey, it's my building. I can tear it down if I want.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you could.
You're allowed to, but should you?
Yeah. Well, it's like, if you don't want to keep and maintain and use a historic building, don't buy it.
Right. No, I agree with you on that. That's my position also.
I mean, But we also have a lot of respect for history here. People like traditions and are proud of our history. So, I've lived in Florida, DC, Seattle. We're fortunate that we probably have a critical mass of historic structures in our two communities.
Yeah.
Than a lot of other places have. Like we still have a lot of stuff, but it's the picking them off one by one.
You're going to
over
lose
time,
them. Yeah.
and you realize, wow, we've lost a lot of stuff.
Now, and that's true. I really agree with that. And people, yeah, it's that kind of that drip effect where you don't realize until it's, pretty far gone how many you've lost.
Yeah. My favorite example of that is when we were growing up in York, Green's Dairy was an old fashioned ice cream and milk dairy in York that had a wonderful 1930s dairy building out near the York Fairgrounds. And it was the kind of place where you go out there and they had an ice cream parlor with a wonderful old green tile and a counter and booths. And the ice cream came in little paper cups inside a metal cone thing, and the same women worked there for like 30 years in white uniforms with the little white hats.
Yeah.
And you could look through a window and see the milk bottling machine running, right?
Yeah.
So you could have your ice cream, you could see there's a real attraction.
Yeah.
Well, Green's got bought out by a bigger company in the 90s. And I remember coming home in the early 2000s, and I went down Highland Avenue, New York, where the dairy used to be. I was like, where's Green's Dairy? It's not here. I can't find it. I'm sure it was here.
Right.
And I go home to my family who had, I've been away 18 years.
Yeah.
They continued living in New York. And I said, what happened to Green's Dairy? And they said, what do you mean? It's on Highland Avenue. I said, no, it's gone. And they didn't even know. They hadn't even noticed that the building had been torn down.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
York Fairgrounds apparently purchased it for, they wanted some more parking in their fairground.
Yeah.
And they tore the building down. And it was one of those things where it's like, it was such an institution and part of our lives.
Yeah.
And when it was gone, people didn't notice until I point out.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know what that says about things.
Well,
but
they hadn't been eating ice cream. They hadn't been eating ice cream.
Well, no, they've been eating ice cream, but this wasn't Green. But that's the kind of incremental thing that happens. And then at some point you realize, oh, all these things are gone.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So how can our listeners support your efforts?
Well, I mean, number one, they can get involved in all the wonderful organizations right in their own community. So if you're in a borough with an historical society or historical group, I think getting involved in those groups and supporting them, those who we want to partner with and we want to support, because they do a lot of the grassroots efforts. Preservation Trust of Lancaster County and Historic York are the lead advocacy groups in both counties. And I know it's, time for people these days seems to be really stretched, and, people only have a bandwidth for so much activities, but getting involved in the other nonprofit organizations that are preserving history is important. For our own organization, we are a nonprofit. Also, we're a regional one, and we're fortunate to have, good state and federal support as a state national heritage area. But, we're also, happy to receive contributions, but more importantly, come visit our visitor centers and experience the programs we offer, and get your kids involved, and take a boat ride when we have this historic boat we're going to start using later this summer for boat tours. Take a tour of the Zimmerman Center or Native Lands Park. Come to events at Columbia Crossing, because a lot of those, our on the ground facilities are designed to engage people in their local history,
right,
and give them an experience right here in our own backyard. And you don't have to travel far to have great experiences, either in the outdoors and
most people miss the things that are closest to them.
Yeah,
they do. This is gonna run out. So if you have more to say, we can just let it run out and then log back in.
I'm fine. I could talk.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your and if there's anything that the trust can help with, let me know, and we can work on that too.
Yeah. And our website.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.